if you watch a hurricane on the news, um, there's this weird sense of acceptance that kind of just washes over you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you're watching nature at its absolute most violent. It's huge. It's chaotic, but it doesn't have an agenda.
Right, it doesn't have a plan.
Exactly. The storm doesn't hate the coastline it destroys. It just
Yeah.
does what it does, based on atmospheric pressure and ocean temperatures and all that.
Because we don't really ascribe moral weight to a storm system, right?
No, not at all.
It's just a massive system trying to, like, balance itself out on a planetary scale. The destruction is a byproduct, it's not a goal.
But imagine standing on your porch and you're watching a Category 5 hurricane tear through your neighborhood.
Terrifying.
Right. But it stops. It stops right at your front door. The swirling vortex just pauses, and it almost seems to, like, look at you.
Oh, wow.
And then it deliberately, politely steps aside to leave your house completely untouched before just continuing on its path.
Well, suddenly that's not just weather anymore.
Exactly. It becomes something that's thinking.
Yeah, it becomes a character, it has agency.
Yeah.
And that realization completely shatters our entire understanding of natural disasters.
It totally does.
I mean, we're no longer dealing with a force of nature at that point. We're dealing with a conscious entity that can actually make choices.
And that profound shattering of the natural order, that's the exact epicenter of the chaos we are wading into today.
That was going to be a messy one.
It is. We are taking you, the listener, right into the heart of one of the most wildly debated, heavily analyzed, and, frankly, deeply polarizing television events in recent memory.
Polarizing is a great word for it.
We're looking at the Season 2 finale of Monarch: Legacy of Monsters, specifically Episode 10, which is appropriately titled Where We Belong.
And we have a massive stack of sources today.
Huge.
Yeah, pulled directly from the official discussion, mega threads on two of the largest community hubs on the internet for this stuff, which are the Monsterverse and Godzilla subreddits.
So we are talking about thousands of fans, right? Thousands of them live reacting, debating, upvoting, and basically just tearing apart every single frame of this deep dive into kaiju lore.
Yeah, and our primary mission here, the goal is to sort of sift through that immense volume of raw, unfiltered reaction.
Because there's a lot of noise.
So much noise. We're going to extract the factual lore drops that were hidden in all that chaos, examine the character moments that completely fractured the audience, and, piece together the mechanical clues regarding the show's complex time riffs.
Right.
And we're doing this because the vibe of our source material today is fundamentally split right down the middle.
I mean, you scroll through these threads and you get absolute mental whiplash.
Oh, yeah.
In one breath, you've got users posting like 1,000-word essays calling this finale absolute peak.
Book fiction, yeah.
They're praising the incredible visual effects, calling the emotional beats between characters beautiful, and openly admitting they cried during certain pivotal interactions.
They view it as this massive triumph of serialized storytelling.
But then, literally one comment down, you find an equally passionate, highly upvoted contingent of fans calling the exact same hour of television a hilariously awful mess.
It's so funny.
Someone literally commented that they were going to have, and I quote, kernels in their poop for the next 6 months because the episode was so unimaginably cornball.
That is painfully descriptive.
I know. They're calling the show a telenovela, writing these massive bulleted lists, complaining about the messy human drama, the erratic character motivations, and just expressing this general exhaustion with how the human element was handled in contrast to the monsters.
Well, the underlying expectation of the audience is really what makes this divide so fascinating.
Right, because of the franchise.
Exactly. When a studio builds a show called Legacy of Monsters, the audience arrives with a very specific, historically ingrained appetite.
They want to see things get smashed.
Right. They expect the spectacle of towering behemoths smashing cities. But the creators of this show attempted something highly ambitious. They tried to ground these godlike, mythic creatures in very flawed, very messy, very intimate human drama.
Which is hard to balance. And when you juxtapose the majestic scale of the Titans with the petty, impatient, and often irrational behavior of a human cast dealing with their own trauma, it creates massive friction.
Huge friction.
But before we dive into the human drama that had half the internet literally pulling their hair out, we need to start with the one sequence that actually unified these warring subreddits.
Thank goodness for this scene.
Truly, the one scene that absolutely delivered on the promise of the show's title.
Yeah.
the sequence that users were universally calling the apex empathy.
Right, we are talking about the confrontation between Kong and the newly introduced Titan,
The big one.
officially designated as Kokai, but affectionately referred to by many fans as Titan X early on in the threads before they knew the name.
Yeah, Titan X. And purely on a technical level, the users were really breaking down why this sequence felt so different from the CGI slugfests we normally see in standard blockbuster movies.
It wasn't just noise.
No, they highlighted that this was a beautifully long, evenly matched fight. It wasn't this quick, shaky cam cutaway nonsense.
Yeah, the visual effects artists and the director, they chose to frame this encounter using what cinematography nerds in the threads identified as very specific low shots.
Low shots, right? So aiming up.
Exactly. By keeping the virtual camera angled up from the perspective of the muddy ground, they essentially forced the audience to view the conflict entirely from a human vantage point.
Which emphasizes the immense scale.
Right. It emphasizes the scale of these creatures. They didn't feel like two digital models just bumping into each other in a weightless void. They moved with this sluggish, terrifying momentum, like tectonic plates colliding.
Yeah, tectonic plates colliding is a great way to put it. And right in the middle of this clash of the Titans, the show throws a fragile human element directly into the meat grinder.
Oh, the car scene.
The driving scene. We have Kaiko driving a vehicle straight through the battlefield. And the fan breakdowns of this specific sequence were just incredible.
They really zeroed in on it.
They described it as a fast and furious moment, pointing out the sheer technical mountain the VFX team had to climb to composite that driving scene.
Because it's so complex.
Right. You have the practical effects of the vehicle bouncing around, the lighting changes from the explosions, and then they have to seamlessly paint in these giant brawling monsters in the background while she just floors it through the mud.
And narratively, it relies on this classic pulp adventure trope, right? Putting the vulnerable human directly in the crosshairs of a God-sized conflict.
Just to give the audience a sense of stakes.
Exactly. But what truly elevated this scene and what really dominated the Reddit discussions, it wasn't the technical execution of the violence.
No, not at all.
It was the psychological resolution of the violence.
Because the fight ends peacefully.
Which is wild.
Which, yeah, in the history of giant monster media, is a massive subversion of expectations.
It never happened.
Kong is completely geared up for a brutal brawl. He has the high ground, he is posturing, beating his chest, and then he just, stops.
He just powers down.
He processes the situation and realizes that Kokai isn't challenging him for territorial dominance. She is just trying to protect her egg.
And the framing of that realization is remarkably tender. Like, Kokai physically holds up the egg to Kong.
Almost like an offering.
Yeah, and in the context of animal behavior, she is exposing her absolute most vulnerable asset to the apex predator.
Wow.
It's interpreted by the human characters and by the audience analyzing the scene online as a desperate apology. She is communicating, in the only way a massive beast can, that she is not there to fight. She is terrified for her child.
And Kong's reaction is what broke the internet in the best way possible. Because he understands. He physically steps aside, lowering his aggression, and just watches her leave. Later on, Kokai even extends a massive tentacle toward Kate as a gesture of goodbye before she departs.
Which is the specific moment that brought several of those hardcore Reddit users to actual tears.
I mean, it's like a massive scarred bouncer at a nightclub, right? He's gearing up for a brutal fight, cracking his knuckles, ready to destroy whoever is crashing the front door.
Right.
Only to realize the person frantically pushing past him is just a panicked mother looking for her lost toddler. And the bouncer just immediately drops his guard and says, "Oh, my bad. Go right ahead." Kong literally just chills on a cliff and lets her pass.
It's so good. And reframing the nature of the perceived threat is such a brilliant narrative device here.
Probably.
Because the fans were very quick to point out the historical and chronological context of this encounter within the show's timeline.
Which is important.
It adds layers to why the humans reacted the way they did initially. You have to remember that this takes place in the year 2017.
Right. And in 2017, humanity had barely encountered any Titans outside of the 2014 San Francisco event.
With Godzilla and the MUTOs.
Exactly. And the MUTOs were absolute world enders. They were EMP-generating parasites that basically treated human cities like nesting grounds.
They were awful.
They were direct, malicious threat to humanity's survival.
So because of that traumatizing precedent, the human characters in the show, and honestly humanity at large, they are primed to see any newly emerging Titan like Kokai, as an apocalyptic threat.
Shoot first, ask questions later.
Exactly. They project the malice of the MUTOs onto every giant organism. But the reality revealed in this sequence is that Kokai is much more akin to a docile, whale-like creature.
Yeah, she possesses a very recognizable maternal drive.
She is a confused animal looking for a safe, ecologically viable place to reproduce. She's not a villain hell-bent on destroying human infrastructure.
Okay, but I do have to push back a little here. And I saw a lot of casual viewers raising this exact point in the threads alongside all the praise. Fans love that Kong was understanding. But doesn't attributing highly evolved, human-like empathy to a building-sized ape severely undermine the terrifying, unpredictable nature of these titans?
That's a valid question.
Like, if we start treating them like big, misunderstood softies who understand apologies, doesn't that completely kill the tension of the Monsterverse?
Well, the deep lore fans tackled that concern head-on. They connect Kong's behavior directly to his established canonical history, rather than just, writing it off as cheap anthropomorphism.
So it's not just making him cute.
Right. This isn't the showrunners making him cute for marketability. Kong's entire psychological profile, as meticulously documented by users referencing Kong Skull Island and all the extended comic lore, it's built on profound childhood trauma.
Oh, because he's an orphan.
Yes, he is the last of his kind. He was orphaned as an infant. He was forced to watch his family slaughtered by the Skullcrawlers.
So his whole existence has been defined by solitary survival in a hyper-aggressive ecosystem.
Exactly. And the lore dictates that because of this specific trauma, he has developed a profound soft spot for the vulnerable, particularly children and orphans.
That makes so much sense.
The subreddit users even brought up his behavior in the later film, Godzilla x Kong, where he consistently exhibits this immense patience and a protective, paternal instinct toward baby Kong.
Even when the kid is being a jerk.
Exactly. Even when the younger ape is being actively hostile. So when Kong sees Kokai desperately protecting her egg, it triggers something deeply ingrained in his own psychological scars.
So it's not that the writers are suddenly putting a human brain in a monkey suit. It's that Kong possesses a highly specific, ecologically and trauma-driven empathy.
Yes, precisely.
He recognizes the terror of losing a family because it is his defining characteristic.
And it shifts the entire narrative paradigm of the Monsterverse. It moves it from a simplistic, monsters fighting in cities blockbuster to a nuanced study of complex apex predators driven by real, ecological and psychological motives.
They aren't just weapons.
No, they aren't just weapons of mass destruction operating on binary logic. They are animals reacting to their environment, their past traumas, and their own survival instincts.
I really want you, the listener, to pause and just consider how that completely rewires the way you watch these action sequences.
It changes everything.
How does your internal perception of a monster change when the creature dominating the screen is suddenly given a maternal instinct rather than just a destructive mandate?
Right.
When the giant ape isn't viewed as a king violently conquering a territory, but as a traumatized survivor recognizing the universal vulnerability of a mother protecting her young.
It elevates the material from pure spectacle to something approaching mythic tragedy.
It really does. It absolutely adds a layer of majesty that pure, unadulterated violence simply cannot achieve. We're watching ancient gods display more emotional intelligence than we expect.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, while the Titans were displaying this incredible emotional maturity and behavioral nuance on the muddy battlefield,
Oh boy, here we go.
the human characters were doing the exact opposite in the control rooms.
Yep.
If the monsters were showing profound emotional intelligence, the humans were acting like absolute unmitigated disasters.
They really were.
And this brings us directly into the massive fracture point of the fan base, which is the human element. We're talking about the growth, the regression, and the telenovela complaints that completely hijack the discussion threads.
Because the massive goodwill built by Kong's empathy completely evaporated for half the audience when they looked at how the human cast was behaving.
Totally.
But to be fair to the writers, we should examine the positive character arcs first.
Let's start with the good.
Yeah, because there were humans who received significant targeted praise from the community for their growth.
Yeah, the fans dubbed them the most improved characters, which was widely agreed to be Tim and May.
Tim and May, yeah.
Now, let's be honest, calling someone most improved is a bit of a backhanded compliment in television criticism.
It implies a rough start.
Yeah, it heavily implies they were incredibly frustrating to watch for the majority of their screen time beforehand.
And they were. Several users wrote lengthy posts specifically detailing how utterly insufferable they found Tim and May throughout Season 1.
They did not hold back.
No. They found May evasive, and they found Tim completely incompetent. But the evolution presented in this finale was undeniable, even to the harshest critics.
The contrast mapped out by one user was hilarious and honestly incredibly accurate. They pointed to Tim in the pilot episode of Season 1, where his entire operational vibe was basically a walking panic attack.
Yes.
He was the guy sweating through his suit, constantly looking around like, oh God, please, someone help me. I have no idea what I'm doing.
Which, to be fair, is a completely relatable and realistic response for a mid-level bureaucrat suddenly confronted with world-ending radioactive leviathans.
Highly relatable. I'd be exactly the same. But then you track that arc to episode 10 of Season 2. That same user posted a timestamped breakdown of Tim's transformation.
It's night and day.
He is no longer panicking. He is actively pointing a weapon, he tackles someone with the kinetic energy of an NFL linebacker, and he is screaming orders like, "Get out of the fucking car," with absolute unshakable authority.
Yeah, the fans noted that he finally stepped into his potential. He provides this necessary mix of tension-breaking comic relief and genuine commanding presence.
He stopped being a liability.
He became an asset. And May, while her overall likability is still a subject of fierce debate in the replies, was universally acknowledged for finally shedding her habit of blaming external forces for her predicament.
Right, she took active ownership of her choices and her consequences in the finale.
Which is huge.
So Tim and May represent the narrative upswing, but then we have the losers of the finale.
The losers, yeah.
And the absolute biggest loser in the eyes of the internet, the character facing a tidal wave of fan backlash and just frustrated meme-making, is Kentaro.
Oh, Kentaro! The frustration with Kentaro's writing is palpable. I mean, it's spanning across hundreds of nested comments and entire dedicated complaint threads.
The recurring phrase that kept popping up was ping-ponging motivation.
Ping-ponging, yeah.
It drove the audience absolutely crazy. In one scene, he is actively doubting the mission, bringing the entire team's morale down, questioning the physics of the plan, and basically acting like a cynical anchor.
Right.
And then literally in the next scene, without any visible internal processing or new information, he suddenly flips a switch, yells something to the effect of, "Fuck it, I'm all in," and charges forward.
It feels incredibly unearned.
Unearned and artificial to the audience watching at home.
And that erratic, highly emotional behavior leads directly to what many viewers cited as the most mechanically and narratively frustrating moment in the entire episode.
The big mistake.
Driven by a sudden, intense burst of impatience, Kentaro rashly pushes the Titan, Kokai, past the safety limits of the neural link.
We really need to unpack the mechanics of this neural link because it is the linchpin of the scene and the primary source of the audience's fury here.
It's crucial to understand it.
The show establishes this technology as an incredibly delicate, highly experimental bioacoustic interface. It is essentially attempting to map human neural pathways and commands onto the vastly different, overwhelmingly complex sensory receptors of a Titan.
The technological hurdle there is immense. I mean, a human brain processes information on a microscale.
Right.
A Titan's nervous system is designed to govern a body the size of a skyscraper, processing environmental data, thermal radiation, and geomagnetic fields.
It's way too much data.
When you bridge those two systems, you run the risk of a massive neurological feedback loop. The limit the characters refer to isn't just a suggestion.
It's a hard boundary.
It's the absolute threshold before the human consciousness is crushed by the Titan's sensory input, or the Titan is driven into an agonizing frenzy by the invasive human signals.
It is the ultimate do not touch button. And Kentaro, dealing with this incredibly volatile, building-sized animal, just forces the connection.
Just jams it.
It is exactly like being the guy who unplugs the office server rack while the core firmware is updating, simply because the progress bar has been stuck at 99% for 5 minutes, and he really wants to go to lunch.
That is the perfect analogy.
You see the giant glowing red warning sign that says, "Do not unplug or system will corrupt." But you let your impatience override logic, you pull the cord, and you crash the entire global network. Kentaro pushed a godlike creature past its biological limit out of pure selfish impatience.
And the fallout from that specific action ties into the much larger overarching complaint from a very vocal segment of the fan base.
The telenovela stuff.
Yes, they argue that moments like Kentaro's rash decision make the show devolve into what they repeatedly label a telenovela.
Because the melodrama is just so heightened.
Exactly. And it feels completely out of place when the backdrop is a crumbling city and giant monsters.
Right, like read the room, guys.
Right.
We're talking about users writing extensive threads detailing their annoyance with the three-way love triangle dynamics between Kate, May, and Kentaro.
It's just exhausting for a lot of people.
There are convoluted arguments about cheating, where characters who have historically been unfaithful are suddenly taking the moral high ground and complaining about being cheated on.
Yeah.
Then you have the exhausting family feuds, heavily centered around the revelation of Hiroshi's multiple secret families. It feels to many viewers like they are watching a daytime soap opera where someone occasionally just looks out a window and mentions Godzilla.
And by breaking down the contrast in the character writing, the root of the fans' division becomes very clear.
How so?
Well, audiences generally forgive flawed characters if they are on a positive trajectory. For example, fans widely praised Kate's arc. She started the series paralyzed by the profound PTSD she suffered during the events of G-Day in San Francisco.
Which was completely debilitating for her.
Over the course of the seasons, she actively confronts that trauma, steps away from her paralyzing fear, and takes decisive action. She matures, but audiences absolutely despise what they perceive as regression.
Which is exactly the banner Kentaro is flying under for these viewers.
Exactly. They feel Kentaro took massive, inexplicable steps backward, completely losing the emotional progress and maturity he seemingly gained while unraveling the mystery of his father, Hiroshi.
He just lost it all.
They argue his sudden impatience with the Neuralink wasn't a natural character flaw, but a lazy narrative device. The writers needed a crisis to occur in the third act, so they artificially forced a character to act stupidly to generate that crisis.
They needed the machinery to break, so they made Kentaro break it.
Yep. And there's a massive, fascinating irony here that the Reddit sleuths pointed out regarding the alignment of the human cast.
Oh, this is great. They noted that the actual designated villain of the show, the surviving Monarch operative Isabel, is operating with a completely different, much more effective mindset than our heroes.
Right. Isabel is a terrifying antagonist precisely because she is so incredibly calm under pressure. She relies on data, not emotion.
During that very same Neuralink sequence, the fans pointed out that it was Isabel who was absolutely adamant that they stay under the safety limit.
She was the voice of reason.
She was closely monitoring the telemetry. She wanted to play it safe, ensure the survival of the Titan, and guarantee the success of the mission.
Yeah.
It was Isabel, the supposed cold-hearted villain, advocating for scientific caution and animal welfare. It was Kentaro, the supposed hero we are meant to root for, who violently pushed the Titan and caused the catastrophic failure.
It perfectly illustrates a recurring cynical theme baked into the DNA of the Monsterverse.
Which is?
Human hubris, emotional instability, and sheer impatience are often the true apocalyptic threats.
The monsters are just animals.
Exactly. The Titans, for all their destructive capability, are usually just animals acting on ancient instincts. The humans are the ones willfully ignoring the flashing warning signs and trying to play God with systems they don't comprehend.
And Kentaro's incredibly rash decision with the Neuralink doesn't just cause a momentary hiccup with a giant monster.
No, it spirals.
It triggers a chain reaction that forces the narrative directly into the most complex, brain-breaking sci-fi element of the entire season.
Time travel.
Yes. We are forced to confront the manipulation of time itself, the physics of the axis mundi, and the devastating emotional fallout of humans meddling with temporal rifts.
The time travel and spatial mechanics in this show have been a source of intense speculation, massive whiteboard theories, and heated debate among the fans since the pilot episode.
Oh, people love mapping this stuff out.
And this finale essentially poured high-octane gasoline on that speculative fire.
Because amidst all the chaos, the show delivers this incredibly heartbreaking, chronologically fractured goodbye scene. We have Kaiko, who has been trapped in this realm, saying a final goodbye to a young Lee Shaw.
Right.
But the twist is that older Lee Shaw, the present-day, aged version of the man she knew, is standing right there, essentially facilitating and translating this moment between the past and the present.
The emotional layering in that scene is staggeringly complex. I mean, you have a character physically confronting a ghost from her past, a past version of someone she deeply loved, while the present, weathered, and aged reality of that same person stands beside her as a constant reminder of the time she has lost.
It's tragic.
And the primary emotion that bubbles up from Kaiko in that moment isn't just profound sorrow, it is intense, burning anger.
She gets genuinely furious at older Shaw. She essentially demands to know why he didn't interfere with her past self.
Yeah, she is screaming at him.
She's asking why he didn't change the trajectory of her life, why he didn't reach through the rift and save her from decades of isolation and the unimaginable pain of being separated from her family.
And the fans, true to form, immediately pause the emotional weight of the scene to debate the scientific logic of her anger.
Because of course they did.
Of course, a large number of users expressed intense frustration, wondering how Kaiko, who is established as a brilliant, pioneering theoretical physicist, could be so seemingly ignorant of the fundamental rules of time travel.
Right, like she should know better.
Exactly. How could a woman of her intellect not instantly grasp that drastically altering the timeline by saving herself would likely trigger a catastrophic temporal paradox?
But this is where the fan discussions evolved past simple complaints and got incredibly deep into the granular mechanics of the Monsterverse.
The physics of it all.
They started mapping out exactly how these rifts function, pulling together clues from previous episodes to formulate what the community widely refers to as the message in a bottle theory.
Billy Randa's theory.
Yeah. And this theory is entirely built on the foundational research of the character Billy Randa.
Yeah, Billy Randa's entire overarching plotline earlier in the series revolved around this exact concept. He was essentially mapping the subterranean topography of the Earth by throwing metaphorical messages in a bottle telemetry beacons into every single temporal rift and hollow Earth entrance he could find around the globe.
Just dropping them in everywhere.
Right. And his crucial paradigm-shifting discovery was that all of these chaotic, disparate pathways through the Axis Mundi eventually converge and spit out their contents at one central, highly unstable location.
Skull Island.
Skull Island.
So the analogy floating around the threads was that Skull Island functions as the drain at the bottom of the sink of the universe.
That's a great visual.
All the gravitational and temporal water, no matter where it enters the system, eventually flows down into that one specific sinkhole.
It is a fantastic way to visualize a complex astrophysical concept because the Axis Mundi isn't just a tunnel. It is a space-time manifold with extreme gravitational distortion. The fans use Billy's sinkhole theory to explain the mechanics of how young Lee Shaw could even appear in the rift to Kaiko at that specific moment, even though canonically he didn't exit his journey at Skull Island in his own timeline.
Okay, so how does that work?
The working theory on the subreddit suggests that while he ultimately exited his rift before reaching the temporal drain, the massive gravitational pull of the Axis Mundi creates something akin to an Einstein-Rosen bridge.
A wormhole.
Right. The walls between different points in time thin out, allowing him to briefly peek through the veil, so to speak, at the other intersecting exit points before he is pulled back into his own chronological stream.
That perfectly explains the mechanical how of his ghostly appearance. But the fans still wrestle with the psychological why of Kaiko's anger.
Right, the emotional side.
If she is a scientist who understands gravitational time dilation and paradoxes, why is she screaming at Shaw to break the laws of physics and save her?
Well, the most insightful users dissected the psychology of the scene, moving beyond the math. They emphasized that the rifts in the Monsterverse aren't merely spatial portals bridging two locations. They are temporal anomalies that warp human perception.
Kaiko has been massively displaced.
Exactly. Because of the time dilation within the Axis Mundi, she hasn't aged normally, but the world has moved on without her. She was robbed of a normal timeline.
She missed everything.
She never got the chance to raise her son, Hiroshi. She never got the chance to properly grieve what she lost.
So her anger in that moment has absolutely nothing to do with scientific logic. It is entirely emotional.
Precisely. One highly upvoted comment pointed out that Kaiko is simply desperately venting. Her anger at older Shaw isn't based on a misunderstanding of quantum physics.
No.
It is the pure, raw, unfiltered grief of a mother and a wife who suddenly realizes she has irrevocably lost decades of her life. She's looking at the people she loved, realizing they lived entire lives without her.
And the only person she can direct that immense pain toward is the man standing next to her who survived the timeline she was denied.
It's devastating.
I want you, the listener, to really put yourself in Kaiko's shoes for a second. Strip away the sci-fi setting. If you had the chance to literally reach your hand into a glowing tear in the fabric of reality and pull a lost loved one out of the abyss.
I mean, who wouldn't?
If you could bring back a parent, a spouse, a child, wouldn't you do it? Even if the world's smartest physicist was standing right next to you, warning you that doing so might risk the structural integrity of the space-time continuum.
He'd still pull them out.
It is a fundamental part of human nature to want to save the people we love, regardless of the cosmic consequences.
And that visceral human instinct raises an incredibly important question. It's the exact same moral and logical dilemma the fandom wrestled with regarding Kintara's actions earlier.
The danger of emotion.
Because the show goes out of its way to heavily hint at the sheer terrifying danger of attempting to alter these timelines based on emotional desires.
Because the variables are completely uncontrollable. You change one thing, and the ripple effects are unimaginable. The butterfly effect on a monstrous scale.
Yeah, the fans mapped out the timeline paradox to illustrate exactly why older Shaw couldn't interfere, using Kintara's desires as the prime example. Let's look at the hypothetical scenario.
Yeah, let's walk through it.
If Kintaro, driven by his desperation and grief, actually managed to reach through the rift and rescue his past father, Hiroshi, from his fate, what happens to the present reality we are watching?
The reality changes.
The present known version of his father recently died. It was the specific, tragic catalyst of Hiroshi's death that caused present-day Kate and Kintaro to finally cross paths, uncover their shared heritage, and bond over the course of 2 traumatizing years.
So if Hiroshi doesn't die, the inciting incident of the entire series is erased.
Exactly. The Reddit theorists realized that if you save the father in the past, he never dies in the present. If he never dies, Kate and Kintaro never have a reason to meet in Japan. They never form their alliance, they never uncover Monarch's secrets, and potentially, depending on how aggressively the timeline corrects itself to eliminate paradoxes, they might be erased from existence entirely.
The universe might just overwrite them.
Yeah. By trying to save the timeline, the characters would destroy the very versions of themselves that possess the knowledge to do the saving.
It is the absolute classic grandfather paradox, but wrapped in a massive kaiju survival story.
One fan brilliantly summarized the show's approach to temporal physics by quoting the classic Doctor Who explanation.
Oh, I know this one.
Yeah, people assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
Timey-wimey stuff.
The narrative is explicitly warning us that human interference with these axis mundi rifts is profoundly dangerous because our brains simply cannot calculate the infinite variables and cascading consequences of our actions.
And because they cannot change the past, because the cosmic risks are simply too catastrophic to risk erasing their own existence, the surviving characters are forced to accept their harsh reality.
You have to move on.
They have to stop looking backwards and start over. They have to build a completely new future from scratch using only what they have left, which seamlessly transitions us into the quiet, character-driven denouement of the episode.
The basement and the villains.
Yes.
The episode gives us a fascinating, incredibly grounded cool down after all the temporal and monstrous chaos.
It gets very quiet.
The grand, globe-trotting adventure across different eras and dimensions is stripped away, and we are left with a very quiet, almost claustrophobically intimate setting.
We see the surviving core group, Keiko, Kate, Tim, and May. And they are literally sitting in a basement.
Yeah, just a dirty basement.
They are in the process of restarting Monarch, completely off the grid, operating in secret from the ground up. And the hardcore fans in the subreddits absolutely devoured this development.
They loved it. It serves as a beautiful, meticulously crafted narrative parallel that really rewards longtime viewers of the franchise.
It really is a perfect full circle moment. One user wrote a long post pointing out how this basement scene perfectly mirrors the actual canonical founding of the original Monarch decades ago.
Back in the 1950s.
Right, when Billy, Randa, and Keiko first developed their wild theories about giant terrestrial organisms in a similarly dingy basement.
Right.
Monarch, which we know from the cinematic universe, eventually mutates into this massive, bloated, heavily militarized, infinitely funded global entity with outposts on every continent, is being violently stripped back down to its indie startup roots.
And it creates a tremendous sense of underdog energy heading into the upcoming season.
The total reset.
The power dynamics have completely shifted. Tim and May, who spent the whole series running from or working for the massive corporate machine, are essentially just employees of the Randa family legacy now.
Tim finally gets to relax a bit.
Yeah, Tim finally gets to step back from the crushing, paralyzing pressure of being a top-tier commander, a leadership role he was clearly never fully comfortable executing. And the surviving Randas take their rightful place at the helm of the organization their family built.
It is like watching a massive, corrupt corporate conglomerate completely collapse under its own weight, only to have the few genuinely good, passionate employees gather in a freezing garage to start a new, better company with the original uncorrupted mission statement.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a palpable joy of discovery here for the fans, getting to witness the connective tissue of the lore being built from the rubble.
But as with any serialized narrative, a new beginning requires a new threat to drive the plot forward.
You can't just have them hanging out in the basement.
No, you need conflict. Or, in this specific case, a surviving threat that has learned from its mistakes.
Isabel,
Isabel.
the Monarch operative who absolutely refused to die.
Yeah.
Much to the intense dismay of several very vocal fans in the threads who were genuinely actively rooting for Kong to accidentally step on her during the battle.
I saw those comments. People really wanted her squished.
They really did.
Yeah.
But Isabel survives the chaos.
Yeah.
And she doesn't just survive. She demonstrates exactly why she is so dangerous by thriving through sheer sociopathic manipulation.
The escape scene.
The episode dedicates an incredible scene to her escape, where she flawlessly plays the role of a helpless, terrified victim just long enough to get a heavily armed soldier to lower his guard.
And then she turns on him.
And then she efficiently, brutally knocks him out, using some highly technical, impressive martial arts.
It is a fantastic character moment, and it perfectly highlights the psychological profile you mentioned earlier.
She's a shark.
She is terrifyingly calculating. She weaponizes human empathy against her enemies.
So keeping Isabel alive and active provides a very specific, necessary type of narrative anchor for Season 3.
It grounds the show.
In a universe entirely focused on giant, chaotic, uncontrollable monsters that operate on primal instinct, the writers desperately need a grounded human antagonist.
They need a human foil.
They need a character who operates with cold logic, absolute selfishness, and tactical precision to serve as a foil to the raw nature of the Titans. Isabel represents the human element at its absolute most dangerous, precisely because she doesn't let emotion cloud her judgment the way Kentaro does.
Yeah, she is positioned to be a massive, calculated thorn in the side of our scrappy basement startup heroes.
So the board is set. We have the underdog team regrouping in the basement. We have the cold, calculating human villain on the loose, plotting her next move.
Everything is in place.
From a pacing standpoint, it feels exactly like the episode is quietly wrapping up. It feels like we're easing into a gentle, contemplative fade to black.
And the writers deploy a reveal that genuinely breaks the internet.
Just when fans thought they could exhale and start writing their season reviews, the show drops a massive Season 3 teasing bombshell that sent the Reddit mega threads into an absolute frenzy of all caps posting.
The arrival of a second Rodan.
The sheer volume of comments pouring into the threads during this final scene was staggering. People were posting that they were physically shaking, that the hype was unreal, that seeing that massive silhouette felt like welcoming a lost dog back home.
It was pure, unadulterated kaiju joy.
Yes. But what was truly impressive, and what makes these deep dive communities so fun to analyze, is how rapidly the fandom pivoted from pure emotional hype to intense forensic lore analysis.
Because placing Rodan in this specific geographical and chronological context creates a massive, glaring continuity puzzle for anyone familiar with the cinematic universe.
For the casual viewer sitting on their couch, they see a giant magma-dripping firebird streak across the screen and they go, cool, it's Rodan, I remember him.
Right, they just recognize the monster.
But the eagle-eyed fans, the ones who have the timeline memorized, instantly spotted the narrative discrepancy. They essentially became digital detectives.
Zooming in on everything.
They started freezing frames, analyzing the background foliage, and zooming in on the extras.
They immediately cross-referenced the scene with the established canon of the movie Godzilla King of the Monsters,
Right.
commonly referred to as KOTM.
Right.
We know, as absolute factual canon from that film, that Rodan has been locked in deep cryogenic and structural containment inside the Isla de Mar volcano in Mexico since the early 1990s.
He's been trapped for decades.
Monarch built a massive, heavily fortified metal installation directly over the crater. They have had him under strict lock and key, monitored 24/7 for decades.
And as we established earlier when discussing the Kokai fight, the present-day events of this television show take place squarely in the year 2017.
Which is before the movie.
That is 2 full years before the eco-terrorist events of KOTM break Rodan out of his Mexican prison.
The chronological math simply does not allow for it. Logically, canonically, the specific Rodan we see emerge from the volcano in KOTM cannot possibly be flying free through the skies in 2017.
No, he is dormant in Mexico.
Therefore, the only logical conclusion, the inescapable deduction that the entire subreddit arrived at within minutes of the episode airing, is that the creature on screen is a second Rodan.
A completely distinct entity.
It is a stunning revelation that expands the known biology of the Titans. And the fans immediately started using context clues from the scene to pinpoint exactly where this second Rodan is currently roosting.
And the sleuthing was incredible. Users paused the frantic sequence and zeroed in on the local people running in the background. They specifically identified the tactical gear and insignia of a mercenary character who is clearly Thai.
Which strongly suggests that the geographical location of this cliffhanger is somewhere in Thailand.
Or at the very least, deeply embedded in Southeast Asia.
Right.
Which, geographically speaking, is half a world away from a contained volcano in Mexico.
But this is where I have to push back and where I think the lore creates a massive logic gap.
Okay, let's hear it.
Monarch is presented as a massive, globally funded, technologically supreme organization dedicated entirely to tracking massive, unidentified terrestrial organisms.
They have all the money.
They have satellites, seismic sensors, and black budget funding. How on earth do they manage to have one Rodan securely locked up in a highly publicized volcano in Mexico, but they somehow completely miss a second giant flaming pterodactyl casually flying around the airspace of Southeast Asia?
It does seem crazy.
That seems like an impossibly massive oversight for an intelligence agency.
It is a colossal oversight.
Yeah.
But that staggering incompetence is exactly the thematic point the fans are making, and it ties perfectly back to why the main characters are currently hiding in a basement.
Oh, okay.
This glaring, continent-sized blind spot is the ultimate proof of why the official, heavily funded Monarch organization is currently failing its mandate.
So the official Monarch has become so bloated by its own bureaucracy, so heavily reliant on its existing data, or perhaps just so fundamentally arrogant that they cannot see the massive, flaming threat flying right in front of them.
Precisely. The leadership at Monarch thinks they have the world's ecology under perfect control because they have one Rodan neatly locked in a box.
They aren't looking for another one.
They aren't actively searching the skies for a second one because their models don't predict a second one. This institutional blindness sets up the absolute perfect underdog mission for our main cast heading into Season 3.
It gives them a purpose.
The newly reformed, agile basement crew has to track down and survive a global threat that the main organization aggressively denies even exists.
It is brilliant narrative synergy. It gives the heroes a purpose that the villains are too blind to see. But the introduction of this creature also opens up a massive can of worms regarding the theoretical ecology of the monsterverse.
Like the ecosystem itself.
Yeah, what happens to the global climate and the Titan hierarchy when there are two apex fire demons suddenly active on the planet?
It can't be good.
The fans were theorizing wildly about the biological implications.
The speculation in the threads is rampant and incredibly creative. One highly popular, heavily debated theory is that this new Thailand-based Rodan is a female of the species. And the showrunners are setting her up to be a mate for the KOTM Rodan once he eventually escapes.
Oh, wow, a giant destructive kaiju romance to parallel the messy human telenovela. I love the thematic resonance of that.
It would be incredible. Other factions of the fanbase are wondering if this second Rodan will serve as the primary antagonist Titan followed throughout Season 3.
And if that is the case, who will he fight?
Right. The show needs monster action. Will the writers introduce a completely original, newly designed Titan for him to battle in the jungles of Asia? Or will they finally bow to fan pressure and bring in another classic monster from the old Toho cinematic library?
Yeah, I saw a massive amount of predictions and desperate hopes for Anguirus making an appearance.
People love Anguirus.
Yeah. People really want to see the spiky, classic Godzilla allies brought into the modern era. But honestly, no matter who this new Rodan ends up fighting, his mere existence completely changes the landscape of the universe.
It permanently shatters the illusion of containment that Monarch relies on.
Yeah.
It proves that humanity does not have a handle on the situation.
Not even close.
And most importantly, from a television production standpoint, it leaves the audience absolutely desperate for answers, guaranteeing they tune in for the next season.
Which is the exact definition of a perfectly executed television finale. It answers just enough questions to feel satisfying, while opening up a massive new frontier of mystery.
So let's briefly trace the incredible narrative journey this episode dragged us through.
It's been a lot.
We started with the surprising, deeply moving emotional intelligence of Kong, a traumatized giant ape showing more maternal understanding and restraint than most of the human cast.
We waded through the incredibly polarizing, heavily criticized human drama, watching characters like Tim finally step into their potential, while Kentaro's disastrous impatience nearly doomed the entire operation.
We navigated the mind-bending, grief-fueled physics of the axis mundi, exploring how extreme gravitational distortion creates temporal nightmares, and realizing the horrifying truth that trying to save the people you love in the past might actively erase your own existence in the present.
We witnessed the collapse of an empire as Monarch was stripped down to its basement startup roots, preparing our heroes to face off against the cold, sociopathic calculation of Isabel.
And finally, we were hit with the explosive, timeline-altering, continuity-breaking arrival of a second Rodan tearing through the skies of Southeast Asia.
It is a truly massive amount of lore, physics, and character study to process in a single hour of television.
It absolutely is. But before we sign off and let the listeners digest all of this, I know you have one more thing.
I do. I want to leave you with one final, deeply unsettling thought to mull over. A hypothesis that builds purely on the fan discussions we've dissected today, combining the complex theories of time travel with the shocking reality of multiple, identical titans appearing across the globe.
I am ready. Lay the theory on us.
We spent a significant amount of time today dissecting the unpredictable variables of time travel. How Kentaro, reaching into the rift to save his father, could inadvertently erase Kate and himself due to the butterfly effect.
Right.
The show goes out of its way, repeatedly, to warn us that the Axis Mundi rifts are highly volatile, deeply unstable, and fundamentally unpredictable.
The ultimate ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey danger.
Exactly. Now, consider the massive Rodan puzzle. The fans brilliantly deduce that the creature in Thailand must be a second Rodan because the linear timeline demands it. The first one is locked in a Mexican volcano.
Okay, yeah.
But what if there's another, much more terrifying explanation hidden in the physics of the rifts?
What do you mean?
What if the very act of humanity, scientists, soldiers, and desperate sons traveling through the Axis Mundi, constantly ripping holes in the delicate fabric of space and time with their telemetry pods and rescue missions?
Yeah.
What if it doesn't just transport people and titans from point A to point B? What if the temporal static actually duplicates them?
Oh my God. You're talking about a temporal cloning effect.
If human interference creates massive alternate timelines, branching realities, and unresolved temporal paradoxes, could the shocking presence of a second Rodan be the direct, unintended result of Monarch recklessly messing with cosmic forces they simply do not understand?
That is insane.
Are our heroes desperately trying to protect the world from a massive, multiplying Titan infestation that their own arrogant time rift meddling actually created? Did human impatience literally manifest a second apocalyptic fire demon out of thin air just by breaking the timeline?
That concept completely changes the moral framework of the entire universe.
It flips it on its head.
That makes the humans not just impatient bystanders, but the actual active architects of their own apocalypse. They are breeding the monsters by trying to study them.
It's a terrifying thought.
That is a truly terrifying thought. And beautifully, it brings us right back to the hurricane we discussed at the very beginning.
Right, the weather analogy.
You think you are just looking at a storm, a natural disaster, doing what it naturally does. But then you realize the storm didn't just happen. You left the door open.
Yeah.
You actively invited the hurricane inside your house.
Wow.
Thank you so much for coming along on this deep dive with us today. Keep questioning the timelines presented to you. Keep looking for the glaring blind spots in the official narratives. And whatever you do, keep an eye out for the monsters hiding in your own metaphorical basements. We will see you next time.